Jack, we want to talk about your book now. It's called Operation Jacknap, a true story of kidnapping, extortion, ransom, and rescue. And by the way, Jacknap is the name, your code name that the FBI gave for your case.
Yes, exactly.
I want to start with something that the Daily News of New York said. It's a local newspaper there. And I think they described your kidnapping best. They said, a simple request for directions that took a detour into hell. And I think that sums up what you went through in that week. So let's go back in time. I'm going to set it up, and then I want to talk to you about it. So on November 12th of 1974, you were 34 years old. You drove home from work. You pulled into your driveway of your home in Great Neck, Long Island, and a car pulled up behind you. And at the time, the person's asking you for directions. So from reading the book, you describe how you went toward the car, and when you got close enough, because it was dark, you realized that the man standing there had a ski mask on, had a gun. And tell me how it is you ended up in the back of the car, because there was another guy with a shotgun in there.
Right. I got out of my car. I pulled into my driveway, as you mentioned. The garage door was closed, and I shut my lights off, which to go in the house. And I look, and the garage door was white, and it was still bright with lights. So I checked my light again. I said, "What's going on?" Then I look at my rearview mirror, and I see there's two headlights behind me. I get out of the car, as you described it. The driver, they both had ski masks. The driver had a pistol, and the passenger had a shotgun. And they asked me for some directions. Then they pulled the guns out, and they said, "You're coming with us, or we're going to blow your head off." So in that split second, I said, there are woods behind our house that I knew. I lived there for 10 years. I said, and it was raining. By the way, it was raining. I said, I can make a run for this. And they would never get to me, because I knew the woods. I knew how to get through it. And I then said the side door to my house, where my wife is with my two little kids, is about 25 feet away. If I do that, are they going to go into my house? So I ended up not running and surrendering, and they pushed me into the back of a little car, a Ford Mustang at the time, and that was the beginning of hell.
The beginning of hell. Jack, I wonder. You said, and this is always something that I always ask crime victims. In that moment, when you thought about running, maybe you could get away from them, what stopped you was the fear of them doing something worse to your wife and your two children in the home, right?
Exactly.
Do you ever regret your decision? Did you do the right thing?
No. And the reason I answered it that way is because actually I wasn't the original target. The original target was my brother. That they tried, we didn't know it at the time. Months later, during the investigation, it all came out. But they actually tried to get him twice over a 3-month period. And he knew something was he didn't know it was a potential kidnapping, but he knew something was wrong. And I knew something was wrong because he told me about it, but who would ever expect a kidnapping?
Right, because there were no indications of a kidnapping, but what the FBI found out later was that this was a plot that was about a year in the making, and that attempts had been made on your brother, but your brother didn't know. He thought it was a business proposition, and someone kept calling to set up a meeting, to get a contract. And so there were red flags, but never a red flag that you two were targets of kidnappers. It didn't reveal itself yet. Okay, so let's let's talk a little bit more about what happened here.
Yeah.
I read in your book that when the kidnappers took you, they put putty over your eyes. What an odd thing to do.
Yes, put putty over my eyes, then glasses over that, and then put a large piece of cardboard, laid me down on the seat the long way, and then a piece of cardboard over that. And then drove for about 45 minutes. And
in the book, you talk about how while you are at the bottom of the car, you have putty on your eyes, you have glasses over that, you know, there are two men with guns. You clearly know something horrible is happening. You're trying to figure out where you are. You noticed that they went through a toll and you were counting time and you were trying to figure out, because you thought, at least if I can figure out where I'm going or how to get away, which ultimately, as we jump forward to your release, was very helpful in helping to figure out where you were kept.
Exactly. And when you go, at that time, they had coin machines. 2 coins were dropped in the machine, and I heard that. And that gave the police and the FBI a lead as to what bridges they went over, because there were only 2 bridges at the time that had a double coin to go through the coin machine.
And again, for our younger viewers, what they may not understand is there was no GPS. There were maps. There were paper maps at that time. There's no such thing as tracking a cell phone or anything. We're talking old school 1974, which is really important, I think, when you look at what a miracle it is that you survived, that you're alive, and that ultimately there were some arrests, although that ended up being very disappointing for you. I want to go now to you were held in an apartment in the Bronx. You didn't know you were in the Bronx. You're chained in a closet. Describe to me how you were held in that closet.
The closet was about 2 feet wide by 5 feet in length. So I couldn't actually lay down the whole way. They had eyelets. I mean, this was very meticulously planned. They had eyelets in the wall on either side. So when they brought me into the closet, the chains were already there, and and I had handcuffs on, and they chained one around my neck to the eyelet on one side with a padlock, and on the other side around my feet with another padlock, with just about enough slack room that if I wanted to kneel, I couldn't stand up, but I could just about kneel if I had to. If I had to relieve myself, I was there 7 days in that same room. It was quite an ordeal.
I can't imagine. Did you have any concept of time when you were chained up in the closet? Did you know how long you had been there, and what were you thinking? I know you kept trying to listen to what you call the person who kept you there your keeper. Did you have any concept of time? Did you know that they were asking for ransom?
No, they never discussed it with me. They never asked me. They never mentioned that part, other than questioning me about the family, my brothers, my father. My mother wasn't alive at the time. Bank accounts, antiques, the business. So they asked me every question you could possibly think of. But they knew, they actually knew answers to some of the questions before they even asked me.
Did you think at this point that there was someone on the inside that had knowledge about your business affairs? Because they kept asking about the employee retirement account.
Yes, exactly. Because they knew there was money in that account. They knew a lot more than they were letting on to me. and they were asking me many questions where they knew the answers before they asked the question,
Jack,
and many that they didn't know. Yeah.
Jack, at your darkest moments in that closet chained up, did you think that you would get out alive?
No, no, never thought I would get out alive. No.
When was it clear to you that you were going to be okay? And maybe even after you were released, you still weren't sure.
When I was released, I thought that was going to be the end of it. But luckily, it turned out. And by the way, the one thing that I have to tell you that really probably saved my life was the fact that the newspapers had the story. They had the story, and they were asked by the police and the FBI, please not to publish it until we get the victim released. And I have to tell you, that probably saved my life, because they listened. The radio was on in the next room 24 hours a day, and I know they were listening to the radio. And it didn't come over the radio because it wasn't in the newspapers. So I think that really helped. Now, would the newspapers do that today? I don't think so. But they did honor their request years ago.
I don't know either, Jack.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, having been in this business for a very long time, I'm very disappointed by this industry of mine. I hope that someone has I hope that they would have a conscience and understand that a man's life hangs in the balance. But I don't know. I don't know if that would happen. Okay, no. I'm going to detour. I'm going to make a few detours here. So again, your kidnappers, they're holding you for a week. They are being very verbally abusive. They're saying very racist things. They're saying anti-Semitic things. You're being bombarded by them, both verbally, besides the fact that you're chained to a closet. I again want to remind everyone, this is a time when there were no cell phones. So while you are being held in this closet, your wife, I want to go back to the moment you were abducted. Your wife comes out, she sees your car, but she doesn't see you, your wife, Janet, and she knows there's something wrong. Your wife calls the police. They come out and they're like, lady, we think your husband's probably having an affair with a friend or a neighbor, and that's why he didn't come home. And your wife, Janet, is like, that's no, right. Something has happened to my husband. And I'm telling you, Jack, it's 4 decades later, and this is still a problem to this day. When someone disappears immediately, oftentimes it is not taken seriously enough by the authorities, and valuable, precious time and evidence is lost because of it.
That's exactly what happened. But my wife had the presence of mind to call after the local police came over and laughed it off as exactly what you said. That night or the morning, she had the presence of mind to call a friend of ours who was an assistant district attorney and who knew me, was older than me, knew me from when I was a child. And she called him and said, look, his name was Jules, Jack didn't come home. Something is wrong. I know something is wrong. And he said, Janet, I've known him since he's been a little boy. This is not his character. Let me call you back. So he called the chief of detectives at Nassau County, which, by the way, is quite a large police department. And they came over, and as soon as they came over, they brought tape recorders. They brought the heavy guns. They taped the phone. In those days, they had these tape recorders with these big tapes. And Fortunately, they did, because that played the first tape. The first ransom call came in at 9 o'clock. These kidnappers made my family suffer from 7 o'clock the day before until the first phone call came at 9 o'clock the following evening. But luckily, the tape recorders picked up the call.
So at this point, so it's about 24 hours after you've been abducted, and finally someone is taking your case, your disappearance seriously. And thank goodness, because 24 hours after you're abducted, the kidnappers call your wife at home, and that's when they tell her that you've been kidnapped and that they want money.
Exactly.
And now this case goes from, something laughable that a cop said, oh, he just didn't come home, to this is a serious kidnapping. At this point, your wife is 30 years old. There are 2 small children in the house. The house is surrounded by police, inside, outside. There are guards there, and they're trying to figure out why you've been targeted and where you are. Over the next few days, what kind of demands does your wife make of the kidnappers? Because she's the one who's talking to these people.
Yes. Well, there were 3 calls. The first call was just, we have him. We have your husband. We want $750,000, and we will get back to you. That was pretty much the extent of the first call. And then a second call came in with some instructions of what they wanted, how they wanted it. Mostly $100 bills. Only about 10,000, I believe, in small bills. The rest of them, and they were going to put the instructions and pictures of me to prove that I was alive in a garbage can at an Exxon station around the corner from my brother's house. He lived about 20 miles away.
Unbelievable. And so in that garbage can is a black bag that I described that kind of looks like a bowling bag. And there are instructions in there. This is the bag that the money has to be placed into, and the instructions. By the time your family raises the money, they raise the $750,000. Your wife is then instructed to go to Manhattan, and she has to go to a payphone to get further instructions, and she's carrying the money. And just so you understand, she ultimately ends up at Penn Station. And Penn Station is a massive train station in Manhattan. Yes. Many, many train lines, lots of tracks, platforms. The place is enormous, and it's always packed. So here's your wife carrying $750,000. She's with your brother, who's, trying to help her, because I'd be, your life is on the line here. The FBI and additional cops are everywhere. They're posing as cab drivers, porters, you name it, all undercover. And they're using what we would call like a walkie-talkie to stay in communication. Your wife takes the call. She's told where to go. She takes the money. She puts it in a locker. And this is the most incredible thing. With all these cops, the FBI, they lose the kidnappers and the money because the radios that they're using to communicate stop working underground.
Exactly. They didn't have equipment at that time that worked underground. And they believe, by the way, the police believe that they knew that the kidnappers knew that, and that's one of the reasons they carried this thing out underground. 450 FBI agents and Nassau County police together were in and around surrounding Penn Station, and they followed them from train to train, but he got on, but they couldn't communicate, so they lost him. And I spoke to one of the head investigators afterwards, and I said, "What Jack? What happened?" He says, "Jack." He says, "We could have grabbed him. We could have, held on to him." He said, "But we wouldn't have gotten you." He said, "The purpose was to get you released. And if we would have grabbed one of them, we knew there were more than one. We wouldn't have gotten you out." So,
Okay, so now you've got the money has been delivered and picked up by the kidnappers. The FBI has lost track of them. They don't know where they've gone. And now everyone waits to see what happens with you. That's what's happening on the home front. You are in the apartment and all of a sudden something changes. Okay, Jack, they take you. You think you're going to be killed. You don't think you're going to be released. You think this is it.
correct,
They're going to kill me right now. That's what they're going to do.
correct, absolutely.
So they drop you off. They drop you off near JFK Airport, and it's near a motel. And you write in the book about how you walked into the motel, you find a payphone, and you called your wife, who at this point is back home with the police waiting. Oh my God, what was that like,
Exactly.
Jack?
Exactly. Well, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I called the house and the phone rang about 15, 18 times. And I said, "What's going on? There's nobody answering the phone." It was a payphone, one of these payphones. And I couldn't believe it. So, but as it turned out, they were trying to trace the call. The police on the other end let it ring and attempt to trace it. They didn't know it was me calling. So, but she did pick up, and that was quite a phone call. But the interesting thing was, as soon as I got, they let me off. They let me off on a dirt road, a block or two from this motel, and I saw this lights of the motel, and I walked up and I mean, I was in the clothes that I could imagine what I looked like, a 7-day beard. Oh, and they put shoe polish all over my face, believe it or not. And I walked in, and there was a night clerk on. He took a look at me, and I said, "Where's the phone?" He pointed to the phone. But as soon as I walked out of that lobby of the motel, within maybe a minute or two, there were cars coming from every direction, FBI cars.
Who is the first person from law enforcement who expressed to you you're safe now?
A car pulled up. The first car that pulled up, there were 3 men in the car, and they looked out of the window. They said, "Are you Jack?" "Yes." "Get in the car." I mean, they held badges up. No, they held.
Right. Can you imagine getting in the car? It's like, I've been through this already, please.
They were 3 FBI agents, and they. I mean, they didn't say get in the. I mean, they would said it a little nicer than that. And I said, "Well, where are we going?" "We're going to." I said, "Can you take me home?" "No, you can't go home. We're taking you to 69th Street, which was the FBI headquarters in New York at that time. They had many floors in this building, and that's where we went."
And that's where you were debriefed and you were questioned, and Janet was questioned.
Yes.
That's when you were reunited with your wife, was at FBI headquarters, correct?
Yes, that night.
So here's what I find interesting about your case. Again, reminding everyone how there was very little technology at the time. At one point, the kidnappers are feeding you and giving you very hot coffee, and you had the wherewithal to look at the cup to see where the coffee was from. And that was instrumental in the FBI trying to figure out where you were held as they started to backtrack to figure out, okay, let's get the kidnappers now.
exactly. It was a Horizon Restaurant, Bronx, New York, was on the cup, and so, but they had a lot of other clues uh, of, of what I heard. You know, the fire department of New York City subways system, the elevated, the ones that are above ground.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they heard those sounds on the tape. Church bells. They had a lot of it, but they never found the place I was held at.
No, they
And
never
they
found the apartment.
no, no, and
Amazing.
not because they didn't spend weeks looking for it, months. They never found it.
So after you're released, they are still looking for the kidnappers and they're looking for your money. And this is going to take a lot of time. And I'm sure it was very frustrating for you. Ultimately,
Yeah.
the alleged kidnappers, one of them was found in Barstow, California, with a brand new motorhome. And the motorhome, according to the cops, was stuffed with cash. It was in the roof. It was, in appliances.
Yeah.
It was, and some of the bills actually lined up with the money, which was connected to your ransom. And what's interesting is that 4 years after your kidnapping, the trial begins. And Richard Williams, who is a high school buddy of a man who was employed by you formerly, Charles Berkeley. These are the two alleged kidnappers. So Richard Williams goes on trial and he's convicted, and then you have a heart attack.
Correct.
It's
After
like
the trial.
after the trial.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, Jack. I can't even imagine. And that's not even the end of the story. That's just it. The man is convicted. Finally, the stress is done. The man is away in prison. You have a heart attack. You're still trying to deal with this, what's happened to you and your family. And then 2 years later, the other alleged kidnapper, the one who used to work for you and your company, turns himself in. But the judge says there isn't enough evidence against him. So that must have been a blow to you. But wait, it gets worse. In 1996, Richard Williams, this is the man who was convicted of kidnapping you. His conviction is overturned because African Americans were excluded from serving on the jury, which, if you think back, that was not a very smart decision on behalf of the prosecutors in this case, because that's not fair. And because he was African American. So what ends up happening is he's released. Then they're going to try and retry him. But there's a fire in the courthouse where all your documents and your evidence from your case is destroyed. This further delays trying to retry this man. Finally, when they recharge Williams, what ends up happening is he pleads no contest, and the judge says, you know what? Well, I'm going to sentence you to time served. So he walked. He did serve some time.
21 years. Total.
21 years. Total.
Yeah.
And then he was released. So in essence, a few decades later, Jack, after you've been through all of this, do you feel that there was justice?
No. But I sued him in civil court. I sued him civilly. I gained a $2 million judgment because and that was in federal court, by the way. I sued him in federal court. And I deposed him. I had him sitting right across the table. And I didn't, the lawyers deposed him. And I was awarded $750,000 plus interest. And it came to about a $2 million judgment.
Did you collect on it?
No. Not that we didn't try. We only recovered about $38,000 of the $750,000, and they sincerely believe that the bulk of the money is still out there somewhere, not in cash form, in land, in a building, and property. He was a real estate. By the way, he was a very successful businessman. This Richard Warren Williams.
So, Jack, I want to talk to you about, so all of this happens, and you, without question, have been traumatized. You have survived. you have also truly experienced what it is to go through the criminal justice system and the disappointments that come with that when you are a victim of crime. How has this changed you, Jack?
Um, well, I'll answer that in two parts. Number one, I think the police and the FBI, irregardless of what you read in the newspapers, I think they were the most professional, compassionate, intelligent group of people that I've ever been involved with. And my wife feels exactly the same way. Uh, as far as the court system, the legal system is concerned, that has a lot to be desired. And it was a 17-week trial, and it just dragged on and on and on and on with all different motions and mistrial, this and all this. And that really was very, very upsetting to me. And I'm not sure that is any different today, unfortunately.
It's very hard for a victim
Yeah.
of crime in the criminal justice system to not only get justice, but support, because the system is just it's a challenging system. One of the reasons, so when you wrote this book, do you feel better after writing it?
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. It was time, and I just the timing was right.
Jack, I know this is important to you, but you're not done with your fight yet. You want your family's money back, and you're offering a reward to try and get that ransom money back. But Jack, I got to ask you, do you really think that's realistic that you're going to find the money?
Well, it's not. It's not only the money. There were at least 4 individuals involved in this kidnapping. Minimum. Could have been more, but there were at least 4. One was caught and sentenced. One was indicted, the one that worked for me, and the indictment was overturned, as you mentioned. There were 2 that were never brought to justice and never found. And so the reward I'm offering is not only for return of a portion of the money, but the 2 that never were never brought to justice. And the reason I'm even doing it is because during the first 4, 5, 6 months of the investigation, we offered a reward. Family offered a reward, and that brought us, which is a long story. I'm not going to get into it, but that brought us to Richard Warren Williams through his brother, who was looking to collect the reward. So it worked.
So you're not done. You're still seeking justice.
I'm not done.
And you know what, Jack? That's why you're alive today.
Yeah.
Because you made it clear that you weren't done. You made it clear to everyone in this universe, that you are not done.
And it's enough of a reward, a $50,000 reward, that someone somewhere, an ex-wife, a son, a daughter-in-law, someone somewhere knows something, and I'm convinced that we will hear something.
I hope you do get justice, Jack, and if you do, I hope you'll come back and share with us. I hope you can close this chapter.
Thank you.